5 days before her wedding, Stephanie Scot went to her school to finish one small task and vanished from a place where she should have been safest. Leon, New South Wales, is a town built on familiarity. Around 10,000 people live there, most of them connected through work, family, or school. It is the kind of place where routines are visible and deviations stand out. When something goes wrong in Leon, people notice. Stephanie Scot was one of those constants. At 26, she taught English and drama at Leon High School, where she was known as dependable, organized, and deeply invested in her students. Teaching ran in her family. Her father had done the same job for years, and colleagues trusted her without question. If Stephanie said something would be handled, it was. Outside of work, her life was narrowing toward a single date, April 11th, 2015. In less than a week, she was due to marry Aaron, a man she had known since childhood. They had grown up in the same town, shared the same circles, and moved naturally from friendship into a relationship that felt inevitable to those around them. Easter Sunday, April 5th, was not meant to be significant. Stephanie told Aaron she would stop by the school briefly to leave handover materials for the substitute teacher who would cover her classes while she was away. It was the last loose end before the wedding. She left home late in the morning, expecting to be back soon. The school was mostly empty. Holiday weekends in Leon are quiet, and Easter Sunday even more so. Stephanie arrived just after 11 a.m., parked her car, and entered the grounds using the main gate. At some point, she was inside the English staff room, working alone. Records later confirmed activity in the building early that afternoon. Then the routine broke. By early evening, Stephanie had not returned home. Aaron sent messages, no reply. He tried to explain it away. Wedding stress, a change of plans, a need for quiet. But as the hours passed, the silence became harder to justify. Stephanie was not someone who disappeared without notice. By nightfall, her car was missing. Her phone remained unanswered. The next morning, there was still nothing. No contact, no explanation, no sign that she had left town or changed her plans. The woman who measured her life in schedules and commitments had simply stopped responding. 5 days before her wedding, Stephanie Scot did not come home. And by the time police were notified, whatever had happened at Leon High School was already hours old. The moment Stephanie Scot was reported missing, investigators were already working against lost time. By the afternoon of April 6th, the concerns surrounding Stephanie's absence had crossed a line. More than 24 hours had passed since anyone had last heard from her, and there was no sign that she had left voluntarily. When Aaron walked into the Leon police station, officers immediately recognized the urgency. This was not a delayed check-in or a misunderstanding. Something had interrupted her day completely. The initial response was fast and methodical. Police began by eliminating the least complicated explanation: an accident. In rural New South Wales, crashes off unsealed roads and into bushland are not uncommon. Search helicopters were deployed to scan nearby creeks, ditches, and isolated stretches of land. Ground units followed likely driving routes. At the same time, investigators began narrowing the timeline, and it narrowed quickly. Stephanie's phone was inactive. Not damaged, not ringing unanswered, inactive. Location tracking was disabled, which meant there was no digital trail to follow. That alone made an accident less likely. In most cases, even a damaged phone leaves some trace. This one left none. Financial records offered no reassurance either. There had been no bank activity, no purchases, no signs of movement after April 4th. Whatever had stopped Stephanie's day had done so abruptly and without preparation. Attention shifted decisively to Leon High School. It was the last confirmed location where Stephanie had been seen, and it was unusually empty that day. Easter Sunday meant no students, no scheduled classes, and minimal staff. What initially seemed like a complication, few witnesses, quickly became an advantage. Anyone present would be identifiable. Investigators confirmed Stephanie had been inside the school early that afternoon. The bell system had activated twice, 7 minutes apart. That detail mattered. Bells are not triggered accidentally. The timestamps suggested movement inside the building at a time when Stephanie should have been alone. It was the first indication that she may not have been. As police canvassed the area, public appeals were released. The response was immediate. Posts circulated rapidly across social media. Local news outlets interrupted regular programming, and volunteers joined the search. In a town like Lyon, disappearance does not remain private for long. Then came the first report that disrupted the assumption of accident entirely. A person who had been near the school on Easter Sunday contacted police. They described hearing a heavy sound in the afternoon, low, irregular, like something being dragged across the floor. It was the kind of noise that did not belong in an empty school. At the time, it meant nothing. In retrospect, it meant everything. They also recalled seeing Stephanie's car parked beneath a covered walkway. Later, it was gone. With that information, the investigation tightened. The search radius shrank. The timeline compressed. Whatever had happened likely occurred inside the school, within a narrow window, and without witnesses. As detectives focused more sharply on who had legitimate access to the building that day, routine interactions were reevaluated. Conversations replayed. Movements were reconsidered. One exchange, in particular, began to stand out, and it would soon force investigators to look not at where Stephanie had gone, but at who had been there with her. When the first confirmed lie emerged, the investigation shifted from uncertainty to a dangerous focus. By Monday morning, investigators had narrowed in on Lyon High School. The campus was eerily quiet on Easter Sunday, meaning any adult on site was immediately notable. Schedules were reviewed. Security logs were checked. Maintenance and cleaning records were compared against the people present. Every entry, every movement became a potential clue. Stephanie Scot had been last confirmed inside the school in the early afternoon. Teachers, administrators, and staff who were supposed to be there were accounted for. The building itself, classrooms, hallways, offices, was a controlled environment. Anyone claiming to have been there needed to match logs, eyewitness accounts, or surveillance. One staff member's statement drew attention immediately. When asked if he had seen Stephanie on Easter Sunday, he claimed he had not. Before investigators could suggest possibilities, he offered a theory. Maybe she had left town, overwhelmed by wedding stress. That explanation arrived too early and before any corroboration, introducing a narrative no one else had considered. Detectives followed up with precise questioning. He said he had briefly stopped by the school to take out the trash, then left to get food. Initially, it appeared plausible. But when police contacted the store he claimed to have visited, it was closed for the holiday. That was the first verified falsehood, a pivot point that changed everything. Innocent explanations suddenly seemed incomplete, if not impossible. Officers returned to his home. He was absent, but his mother allowed a search. Inside, police found keys that could only belong to Stephanie Scot, keys that should never have been in that house. Their discovery alone reframed the investigation. Stephanie's absence was no longer a matter of uncertainty. It was now a question of intentional action. Every contradiction from that moment became critical. Investigators retraced his claimed movements, compared them with independent observations, and examined any possible access points he could have had to the school. Small details began to accumulate. Who entered the building, who left, and at what times. The weight of physical evidence was amplified by subtle observations. Staff who had casually interacted with him during the Monday return noted minor discrepancies. Unexplained scratches on his face, unusual casual remarks about Stephanie's disappearance, and inconsistencies in timelines. None of these details proved guilt alone, but together they began to paint a troubling pattern. From that point forward, investigators stopped asking, "Where is Stephanie?" The question shifted to, how much did this man know, and what had he done? The circle was tightening. Access, opportunity, and verified contradictions all pointed to a single focus. Every falsehood, every key, and every misalignment was now evidence driving toward an inevitable confrontation. The building where Stephanie had felt safest, where she had gone about her routine, had become the center of the investigation. The quiet halls that once echoed lessons and laughter now contained questions that would not be easily answered. In one detail, the first lie that could be disproven, had illuminated the dark path ahead. Evidence doesn't lie, and sometimes it tells a story the world isn't ready to hear. After Stephanie Scott's keys were found in the suspect's home, investigators had a concrete connection, but the case was far from complete. They needed proof that went beyond possession, evidence that could place her, alive or injured, inside the house and show that deception had taken place. In the backyard, tire tracks traced a path toward shed. At first glance, they seemed ordinary, but their placement in soft earth, where no vehicle should have been, made them significant. Inside the shed and on nearby MDF boards, stains were discovered. Forensic tests later confirmed them as Stephanie's blood. The traces were minimal, but each one marked a step in a chain of events that could no longer be ignored. Inside the house, a camera held images that investigators initially hesitated to examine. When they did, the photographs confirmed the fear they had long suspected. A woman was captured in distress, partially obscured but unmistakable to those familiar with her. The photos were not sensationalized in the report. They simply existed, and that alone carried weight. A critical contradiction emerged from the suspect's statements. He had claimed to leave the school to visit a nearby store, but police confirmed the store was closed for Easter. The lie was straightforward but pivotal. It was the first confirmed falsehood, and now connected directly to the physical evidence found on the property. The combination of these discoveries told a silent story. Tire tracks, blood, keys, and digital images, all individually significant, together formed an unmistakable path that investigators could follow. They pointed to someone with access, opportunity, and knowledge that only the perpetrator could have possessed. Around Leon, the results of a search began to affect daily life. Police tape blocked familiar paths. Lights flicked on late into the night as officers continued forensic work. Teachers altered routines, and neighbors noticed unusual activity. These subtle shifts conveyed the gravity of the situation without narration needing to spell it out. From that moment, the case changed irreversibly. It was no longer about a missing teacher. The evidence had shifted the story toward action, accountability, and the first signs of irrefutable connection between Stephanie and the person in her proximity that day. Investigators now had the physical and digital anchors that would allow them to reconstruct the hours that had vanished without explanation. And one final trace, still to be discovered, would leave no doubt about what had been done and who had done it. Evidence alone doesn't solve a case, but patterns built from that evidence can leave no room for doubt. Investigators now had the pieces from the suspect's home: Stephanie's keys, bloodstained boards, and digital images. Rather than repeat each item, they focused on what the combination revealed. Tire tracks traced his movements across the property. Blood on the MDF boards showed exactly where Stephanie had been. The camera images confirmed her presence and captured details that could be aligned with the suspect's timeline. Instead of dwelling on individual items, investigators began reconstructing his day. The contradictions in his statements, such as the visit to a closed store, stood out sharply against the physical evidence. Each inconsistency tightened the circle. He could no longer explain the location of objects, the sequence of events, or his own movements without being contradicted by a forensic fact. Patterns emerged quietly but powerfully. Timelines from school bells, his vehicle, and digital footprints now intersected precisely where he claimed to be, and often where he was not. These connections allowed investigators to anticipate his next moves, monitoring his behavior while coordinating searches and interviews. No narration or speculation was needed. The pattern itself drove the story. At the school, the atmosphere had shifted subtly but noticeably. Lights flicked late into the night as officers documented, photographed, and cross-referenced everything. Doors previously left unlocked were now examined for signs of entry or tampering. Staff arrived to find the building still under intense scrutiny, a silent confirmation that the investigation had moved from theory to action. Investigators also began linking minor contradictions in his explanations with physical evidence. Small details, a misplaced key, a timestamp that didn't align, a vehicle location at odds with his claim, formed a network of proof that left little room for ambiguity. Each verified fact narrowed his opportunity for misdirection. By the end of this stage, the case had shifted from suspicion to near certainty. The suspect's misstatements, combined with corroborated evidence, created a chain of cause and effect that could no longer be ignored. Investigators had moved beyond searching for what might have happened. They now had a clear view of how it had unfolded and who had orchestrated it. Even without confrontation, the pattern left the suspect vulnerable. Any misstep, revealing a lie, a misplaced object, a forgotten timestamp, could expose the truth completely. The investigation had reached a point where the evidence itself was the threat, and every action he took would either confirm or contradict it. Sometimes the evidence doesn't whisper, it speaks loudly for those who know how to listen. Investigators had already mapped the suspect's physical movements through the school and nearby areas. Now, attention turned to his digital footprint. Alone, his searches seemed ordinary. But patterns emerged. Queries about brides, weddings, and acts of sexual violence appeared repeatedly, spanning weeks. These weren't random clicks. They filled in gaps between his observed movements, showing deliberate preparation. Alongside the online activity, investigators found detailed notes tracking Stephanie's routines, when she would leave the classroom, when she was home alone, and who else might be present. These records were precise, time-stamped, and consistent with prior observations. No prior physical evidence could convey planning like this. Now, motive and opportunity began to converge in a single, undeniable pattern. Meanwhile, minor contradictions in the suspect's statements grew more significant. Surveillance footage, store closures, and witness observations verified where he had been and when. Each discrepancy reduced his ability to explain or mislead. Investigators began coordinating around these insights, checking alibis, reviewing schedules, and confirming timelines, methodically tightening the net. Every step of the investigation now focused on connecting the dots. Physical traces, keys, tire tracks, and blood evidence were already established. What the digital and written records added was context, intent, forethought, and observation. This phase of the investigation was no longer about proving presence. It was about proving premeditation. Even small details became significant. A timestamp showing him entering the school shortly before Stephanie left, a repeated search on related topics, a note describing her movements. Each element strengthened the narrative without needing commentary or exaggeration. Investigators could now anticipate potential actions and plan accordingly, creating a timeline that would soon leave him no room to maneuver. By the end of this stage, the story had shifted. The disappearance was no longer random. Evidence indicated deliberate planning, careful observation, and targeted intent. Investigators were now poised for a critical breakthrough. One more discovery could tie the suspect's movements, searches, and observations directly to Stephanie, proving intent beyond doubt. Investigators laid out the timeline, photographs, and digital logs in front of him. Each piece of evidence exposed a contradiction he could no longer explain. His eyes flickered from screen to screen, hesitation stretching longer with every detail presented. Small inconsistencies, messages unsent, keys out of place, timestamps that didn't match, formed a chain that pointed directly to him. He shifted in his seat, deflective comments growing thinner, denials shorter. Minutes passed. Every attempt to minimize his involvement was quietly dismantled by the facts in front of him. The room was silent, except for the clicking of keyboards and the occasional shuffle of papers. Finally, he spoke. He admitted the stalking routines, the careful planning, and the attack itself. Each revelation confirmed what investigators had pieced together through tire tracks, blood traces, digital searches, and object placement. As he described the sequence of events, officers documented every word, corroborating each detail with physical and digital evidence. No explanation could reverse the clarity of the case now. Even as the confession unfolded, investigators remained methodical, verifying each statement, photographing each item, securing every trace. The suspect's movements, once shrouded in uncertainty, were now fully mapped. Every timeline aligned, every pattern confirmed. With the confession complete, investigators turned to corroborate each fact and prepare for prosecution. The mystery that had gripped Leon had ended. The pursuit of justice had begun. Investigators documented all evidence, cross-referencing physical, digital, and testimonial records to ensure the case was airtight. Each step, from timeline verification to corroboration of search queries, reinforced the prosecution's narrative. Court proceedings followed. Charges were filed, and trial dates were scheduled. Prosecutors presented a clear sequence of events, showing how each piece of evidence aligned with the suspect's confession and movements. Every statement, timestamp, and physical trace was verified in court. In Leon, schools reopened under supervision, neighbors returned to routine, and local authorities completed final reports. Police continued minor follow-ups to ensure security protocols were reinforced and that procedural recommendations were implemented. Stephanie's family attended court sessions, reviewing evidence, listening to testimonies, and following the judicial process closely. While the loss remained, they gained clarity on the timeline, investigative findings, and final outcomes. With the conviction secured, the case officially closed. The suspect's actions have been documented, verified, and adjudicated. Leon resumed daily life with the facts of the case firmly recorded and law enforcement procedures concluded. Following the resolution of Stephanie's case, Leon High and nearby schools upgraded security systems. Electronic badge readers were installed at all entrances, and surveillance cameras were repositioned to cover blind spots. Staff movements were now logged automatically, ensuring that unusual absences or entries could be detected immediately. The town created a memorial plaque in Stephanie's honor, installed in the school's main hallway. Each year, assemblies commemorate her life, emphasizing safety awareness and community vigilance to students and staff alike. Neighborhood watch programs expanded throughout Leon. Residents attended monthly meetings, reported suspicious activity promptly, and participated in coordinated patrols. Schools instituted regular emergency drills, ensuring that both staff and students could respond effectively in a crisis. Law enforcement adopted lessons directly from the investigation. Digital tracking protocols were revised to allow rapid reconstruction of movement timelines, and procedures for integrating physical, testimonial, and electronic evidence were standardized. Investigators cited Stephanie's case in training sessions, emphasizing how early coordination and evidence pattern recognition led to the successful resolution. Stephanie's case left a lasting imprint. Schools were safer, neighborhood vigilance increased, and law enforcement methods improved. The factual record of the investigation, combined with memorial and procedural changes, created a tangible legacy, one rooted in concrete action rather than abstract reflection. Investigators' work did not end with the conviction. Leon police now run regular digital timeline exercises, coordinating evidence, witness statements, and electronic records to prepare for future missing person cases. At Leon High and nearby schools, quarterly emergency drills put students and staff through lockdowns, evacuation routes, and communication exercises, while security audits ensure access points are monitored. Neighborhood watch groups patrol actively, reporting unusual activity and hosting safety workshops for residents. A memorial plaque at the school honors Stephanie, and annual assemblies combine remembrance with practical lessons on vigilance and preparedness. Through these measures, the community maintains a clear, tangible legacy. Structured investigative procedures, practice school protocols, engaged citizens, and visible reminders of the case, all reinforcing safety and awareness in Leon.